They say dragons aren't real, that unicorns are just fairy tales. But what if I told you that some of the world's most legendary creatures might have actually existed? From the depths of ancient scrolls to modern-day sightings, these beings have left traces that even science can't fully explain. Think about this. Nearly every culture across the globe has stories about the same creatures despite being separated by vast oceans and endless mountains. How is that possible? Today, we're diving into the most mysterious beings that have haunted the human imagination for thousands of years. And trust me, what we found will change how you see these myths forever. Unexplained global connections. You know what's weird? When ancient people from Greece wrote about dragons, their descriptions matched exactly with what Chinese writers were saying on the other side of the world. And they had no way to talk to each other. No phones, no internet, not even faster horses. Just nothing. The Homo floresiensis. Discovery. But before we uncover these creatures, let me tell you something that blew my mind while researching this video. In 2004, scientists discovered the bones of a tiny human species on an Indonesian island. People had been telling stories about small, human-like creatures living in the forests there for generations. Everyone thought they were just myths. Turns out, they were real. They're called Homo floresiensis, but locals knew about them all along. This discovery changed everything we thought we knew about mythology. What other stories might be true? What other creatures might have actually existed? That's exactly what we're going to explore today. Ancient mysteries. The Griffin. Let's start with the most elusive creature of all time. The Griffin. Half eagle, half lion. This beast has appeared in stories from Egypt to Persia to Greece. But here's what's interesting. Fossil hunters in the Gobi Desert found something strange. They discovered the remains of Protoceratops, a dinosaur that looks exactly like how ancient people described griffins. These fossils were scattered across ancient trade routes. Gold miners would dig them up and find these massive beaks attached to four-legged bodies. Sound familiar? Ocean depths. The Kraken. But that's just the beginning. Let's talk about the Kraken. For centuries, sailors warned about a massive creature that could drag entire ships into the ocean's depths. Scientists laughed at these stories until they discovered the colossal squid. These things can grow up to 46 feet long, with eyes the size of dinner plates. And guess what? They live exactly where all those ancient sailors reported seeing the Kraken. Underwater humanoids. Merfolk mysteries. Speaking of water creatures, let's dive into something even stranger. Mermaids. Now, I know what you're thinking. Half human, half fish? That's impossible. But here's where it gets interesting. In 1741, a German naturalist named Georg Steller saw something in the Arctic waters that he couldn't explain. He documented a creature that looked like a cross between a human and a fish. Today, we know these as Steller's sea cows, a species that went extinct shortly after its discovery. But here's the catch. Steller was a respected scientist who had discovered numerous real species. Why would he make this up? Legendary beings, unicorns and narwhals. Now, let's talk about unicorns. But not the sparkly kind you're thinking of. Ancient Chinese texts described a creature called the Qilin, a single-horned beast that brought good fortune. Meanwhile, in Europe, travelers wrote about fierce one-horned animals in India. Here's the twist. They were all probably talking about the same thing, rhinoceros. When Marco Polo first saw a rhinoceros, he declared it a unicorn. But why did so many cultures associate single-horned creatures with magic and purity? The answer might lie in something even stranger. The narwhal. These Arctic whales have a single spiral tusk that resembles the unicorn horns displayed in medieval European castles. In fact, Vikings used to trade these tusks for entire estates, claiming they were unicorn horns with magical powers. Dragons. A global phenomenon. But let's get to the really big mystery. Dragons. Every culture has them. Every single one. From Norse mythology to Chinese legends, from African folklore to South American tales. They all describe massive reptilian creatures that could fly and breathe fire. That's weird, right? Here's something even weirder. In 2017, paleontologists found the fossils of a flying reptile with a wingspan of 39 feet. That's bigger than a small plane. It's called Quetzalcoatlus, and it is named after the Aztec flying serpent god. Coincidence? Maybe not. But what about the fire-breathing part? Well, there's a scientific explanation for that too. Some animals today can spray toxic chemicals as defense mechanisms. The bombardier beetle literally shoots boiling hot chemicals from its body. Is it so crazy to think that an ancient flying reptile might have had similar abilities? Modern mystery. The Yeti. Let's talk about something really recent. The Yeti. For centuries, people in the Himalayas have reported seeing a large, ape-like creature in the mountains. Western explorers laughed it off as superstition. Then, in 2019, the Indian Army posted pictures of what they claimed were Yeti footprints. Even more interesting? Scientists analyzing hair samples from supposed Yeti sightings found they belonged to an unknown species of ancient bear. This brings us to a crucial point. What we call myths might actually be memories. Ancient people didn't just make up these stories for fun. They were trying to explain the world around them, and they did it pretty accurately, considering their limited technology. Hidden wonders. Native American legends. Now, let's talk about something that might be living in your backyard right now. The Native Americans spoke of little people they called pukwudgies. These small, gray-skinned beings were said to have magical powers and lived in the woods. Sound crazy? Well, remember those Indonesian hobbits we talked about earlier? Scientists now think that the small human species might have survived much longer than we thought, maybe even into recorded history. Asian mysteries. The KAPPA. And speaking of small creatures, let's look at the Japanese KAPPA. These water creatures were said to be about the size of a child, with turtle-like features and a bowl-shaped indent on their heads that had to stay filled with water. For centuries, people thought this was pure fiction. Then, scientists discovered fossils of a human-sized amphibious dinosaur called Kachusaurus hui in Asia. It had similar features to the KAPPA, including a distinctive head crest. Lake monsters. Beyond. NESSIE. Let's fast forward to modern times. You've probably heard of the Loch Ness Monster. But did you know there are over 1,000 recorded sightings of similar creatures in lakes worldwide? People keep seeing these long-necked creatures from Lake Champlain in North America to Lake Okanagan in Canada. Here's something wild. In 1977, a Japanese fishing boat caught something strange near New Zealand. It was 33 feet long with a long neck and fins. They took pictures before throwing it back. Scientists still debate what it was. Some say it was a decomposed basking shark, but the measurements don't add up. Aerial enigmas, thunderbirds, and Mothman. Remember those flying creatures we talked about? Well, there's more. In the American Southwest, Native Americans painted images of something they called the thunderbird, a massive bird so large it could carry away a whale. Crazy, right? But in 2021, scientists found fossils of a new flying reptile in Australia that could have eaten small whales. They named it Thapungaka Showi, and it was absolutely massive. But what about more recent flying mysteries? In Point Pleasant, West Virginia, dozens of people reported seeing a massive, winged humanoid creature in 1966 to 67. They called it the Mothman. Witnesses included police officers and respected members of the community. Even stranger? The sightings stopped after the Silver Bridge collapsed, killing 46 people. Some say the Mothman was trying to warn people. Waterworlds. Sea serpents and selkies. Let's go back underwater for a moment. For centuries, sailors reported seeing enormous sea serpents with glowing eyes in the Caribbean. Scientists dismissed these stories until they discovered that the area is home to massive chains of siphonophores, colonial organisms that can grow to over 130 feet long and produce bioluminescence. From a distance, they look exactly like the sea serpents in old sailing reports. And what about the selkies of Scottish folklore? These creatures could transform from seals into humans by shedding their skin. Pure fiction? Maybe not. Recent studies have shown that medieval Scots might have encountered rarely seen hooded seals, which can inflate a membrane on their head to look startlingly human-like. Patterns and connections. Here's something fascinating. Many cryptids follow similar patterns. They're often reported in areas where their ancient relatives once lived. The Australian bunyip is reported in places where prehistoric mammals once roamed. The Russian almasty is seen where ancient hominids live. And it's not just location, it's timing too. Many cryptid sightings happen during specific environmental conditions. Lake monsters are often seen during thermal turns when deep water rises to the surface. Flying creatures are reported during storm seasons. These patterns suggest there might be real, natural phenomena behind these sightings. Modern discoveries. Today, we're still discovering new species that sound like they belong in mythology. In 2020, scientists found a snake in Southeast Asia that can glide through the air by flattening its body. In 2021, they discovered a real-life dragon, a tiny lizard with extendable wings that can glide between trees. And here's something mind-blowing. We're finding evidence that some extinct creatures were even stranger than we imagined. Recent studies suggest some dinosaurs might have been bioluminescent. Others might have had camouflage abilities we thought impossible. The reality, it turns out, is often more fantastic than a myth. Conclusion. The world is full of mysteries, and we're nowhere near solving them all. Every year, scientists discover around 18,000 new species. Think about that. 18,000 living things we never knew existed, and those are just the ones we can find and classify. But maybe the most important lesson isn't about whether these creatures exist or not. Maybe it's about staying curious, keeping an open mind, and remembering that our ancestors weren't just telling stories. They were trying to make sense of a mysterious world, just like we are today. If you want to learn more about these incredible creatures and the latest discoveries, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.